Okay, well, we're back, and you're probably wondering why we left off at part 16 and coming back now to see the truggy all put together. Well, the unfortunate has happened. I had a brand new tape for the camcorder, or the video recorder, that broke, and that tape was the last build steps. So, without that, this is where we're at. But we did leave off at the rear of the vehicle, so what I'm going to do is just kind of give a quick rundown here of things. Basically, where we left off, we were trying to round up the parts to put the upper links together and finish up the rear suspension. Basically, you can see where the upper links mount on. I've actually got them in the center inside hole, and then on the outside where they go to the hub, they're actually, let me see if I can get a little light in there. There we go. You can actually see it's in the inner upper corner, and that seems to be pretty much the norm for what most guys are setting up. Now, since this has been done, I have done the setup on the Hootie gauges, so everything is aligned properly. You can see sway bar mount is in. I'll get down here just about to the end of it. They're pretty much straight up and down on the links for the sway bar mount. Drive shafts are in, bearings are in, knuckles are on. On the knuckles, there's a plastic shim that adjusts your wheelbase. That is actually the background here, placed in the front. Let the camera try to focus in here. Right there, that's long wheelbase. Okay, you can see the captured pins that come for the hubs, which is really nice. My buggy's still got the C-clip pins for the hubs, but I haven't had any issues with them. I'll go back. You'll see I did one little modification here on the shock towers. There's an upper bolt, comes through the wing mount, basically through the top right there, and then comes through into the diff case. I put a longer bolt through those and ground off the two little nubs on this support. Let me grab a punch or a poker here, something I can kind of point with. Basically, this piece right here has a little bit of a hump that comes out off of it right through here. I cut those humps off with a cutoff wheel right straight through there. Gives me enough room to get a longer bolt through with a nut on. On my buggy, I noticed after a couple of nasty crashes where the wing would take some shock. I mean, basically the wing's mounted to the top of that. I was getting some premature separation right along the diff case housing right here. And what was happening was the screws were pulling out of the plastic. I've done the same thing on my buggy. Haven't run into an issue with it since. It's been working great. So basically the rear end's together. Shocks are mounted. You can see where the body mounts go. These are off of the recommended post mounts in the manual. It's going to be the uppermost hole. See if we can get in there. Kind of tough to see. And then the shocks, that'll be preference, as far as where you want them. I'm running a pretty heavy setup, so I've got the shocks beefed up pretty good. You can see right now I've got 3 thick collars on the back. That's with the Monster 8400 battery packs that I've got. They're pretty big, pretty heavy. More than likely won't be running with those and step down in the future here to a set of 6500s to lighten the load. So we'll go on to battery trays are installed. You can see my blind nuts. That's to hold battery trays. I actually had a battery tray come out of my Fusion buggy. Happened to be the motor side one because it gets removed all the time for pinion gear changes. So I came up with that little creative little idea. Just a couple of blind nuts, some 4mm screws through the chassis that are countersunk, and I'll flip this over here. You can see right there where they're countersunk in there. There's the one for the front, there's the one for the rear. And I then thread lock those into place. There's a thin piece of foam under where the step is in there, and there's also a thin sheet of Lexan laying in the bottom of the tray. That keeps anything from basically pressing into the battery. Servo's installed, receivers installed. I kind of do a little mod on my box. I cut the lids open on them, leave it hinged in the back here, and then just use a zip tie to hold it shut. Keeps 95% of the dirt out of there, but yet if I have to access it, I can cut it off. I don't have to unbolt anything. I mean, it's pretty much good to go. Servo mount is flipped, or servo mount, excuse me. The ESC mount has been flipped for more clearance. We went through that in the build when I did that, but basically it's the same thing as the buggy. With the monster speed controller, give yourself a little more clearance around the batteries. Flip it over, notch it out so it clears the drive shaft. You don't, have to put the post back in the corner back here. I know Dustin runs his without the post back here, and that is a pretty solid L bracket that this thing's sitting on, so you really don't need that post back there. It's something you can, if you want, you can do it. You don't have to if you don't want to. We'll kind of flip around. I can give you some shots of the front here. Everything's installed and aligned. I went with 1 degree of camber and 1 degree of toe out. So basically everything's lined up on the front. To make things easier when I do the builds, I tend to build them everything straight up and down as far as 0 camber. I set the tie rods to the same length each side, so when I do go and throw the gauges on, it's a lot easier to do your alignment. You're not way out of whack on one side and closer on the other side. You'll see where I shim down the steering a little bit. That little aluminum shim and washer dropped the ball down just about 1/8 of an inch. I noticed on my buggy from full lock right and left doing that, there was kind of an uphill downhill effect, like it got high in the center and then dropped off. Lowering the ball ends here off of the Ackerman arm, or the Ackerman plate, got rid of that, and it's improved the steering overall on both of them. The steering on this buggy, or the Truggy, does have captured balls, if I can get, which is a big improvement. Very nice, don't have to worry about them breaking. You can see everything there. The aluminum front brace on the Truggy, they're double screwed to the chassis plate. You can see the 2 holes down there, and the other one is right in there. What else can we go over here? There's the Castle 2200 kV monster motor. You can see plenty of clearance in the front. I took pictures and posted these on Caster's forum. I can just about get my index finger through there. I mean, that's a lot of room, plenty of room. You don't have to worry about it hitting the steering post, no mods needed. Same goes for underneath. There's just about a 1/2 inch of clearance there. This does have a 64 tooth spur gear, and that's the reason that the motor sits up so high. The other battery tray, same modification done. I cleaned up my buggy mud guards and threw them on the Truggy chassis so you can see them on here. It's the same mounting holes. You'll notice though on the Truggy that the battery box just barely sits over the one edge. It's not near as, how can I say that? On the buggy, those battery trays sit way over the edge of the mud guards. On this, they don't. You'll also notice there's a lot more clearance between the motor and the pinion gear and the battery tray on the Truggy. There's quite a bit of room here. I can get my finger down in between the pinion and the battery tray, whereas on the Truggy it's pretty tight. Also on the back, the hinge pin actually sits into the plastic on the battery tray on the Fusion buggy. So this one does have a little bit more room to play with. Don't have to worry about the battery slapping into the pinion gear.